patches for many of us first thing tomorrow morning. A few spots of rain, sleet and perhaps a bit of hill snow first thing tomorrow morning across some parts of England and Wales. Generally dry, generally quite bright for many, away from eastern areas where it's quite cloudy. Similar story across Northern Ireland, lots of bright skies, just a few showers here and there, and these could be a bit of a wintry mix. Southern parts of Scotland largely dry and bright, but across northern parts of Scotland we continue to see more snow pushing its way in. Snow's going to continue to build up, more travel disruption expected. Through the bulk of the day, it's looking largely fine for many places across the country, except across parts of northern Scotland where it stays quite snowy. Lots of sunshine for most, but clouds starting to build across parts of western Northern Ireland and southwest England as well. It is again going to be a cold day for many, despite the sunshine towards the east. Strong gusty winds towards the northeast, but starting to turn milder for a little while across some parts of the southwest. That's because we do have a bit of rain arriving as we go through tomorrow evening. Then, as I mentioned at the start, Storm Goretti is arriving, a deep area of low pressure tracking to the south of the UK, bringing some very wet and windy weather to southern parts and snow for the Midlands.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you for making us Britain's #1 news channel. Together, we have built something truly extraordinary.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The A93 is closed at the Snowgate at Spittal of Glenshee due to adverse weather. In Cumbria, congestion on the A595 northbound between the A5094 junctions either side of Whitehaven is causing delays of around 10 minutes. In Swindon, heavy queues on the A419 northbound between the A4259 and the A4311 are adding up to 50 minutes. In Northamptonshire, the M1 northbound between junction 18 and junction 19 has 2 lanes closed after a crash. And on the trains, there is major disruption on the Elizabeth Line and Great Western Railway. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Hello from the Aurora Collection Resort here in Lapland. We're on an amazing Arctic adventure to celebrate our greatest cash giveaway, a simply stunning £85,000. And in 2026, we're giving you the chance to win it all.
For another chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB18 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 30th of January. The winner may be contacted live on GB News, week commencing the 9th of February 2026. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Bold. They are under no illusion.
Ray.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get this on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dewbs & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
All too often, people will be sitting at home watching a press conference live, and they'll hear loads of questions being asked, and they'll be thinking, that's not my question. That's not my concern.
We don't care whose feathers we ruffle. We ask the questions that you want answering.
You're all standing on the street protesting and want to have an open discussion.
My name is Patrick Christie's. I do a show for GB News in the UK. Is it possible to talk to you quickly?
Journalism in this country has been a cosy world full of groupthink. until now.
Well, this is the best view ever of Whitehall, looking out across all the tractor drivers of England who've come together to make their point.
Hello, so as you can see, I'm here in Westminster as the protest begins.
Yes, I'm very much in the thick of it.
Look, we're challenging narratives here at GBNews, and that's what sets us apart.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co coming up today. It's been a big day for the so-called coalition of the willing. We'll cut live to a press conference there, see what has actually been agreed, and crucially, what all of this will mean for Britain. Also tonight, Jimmy Mizzen. Do you remember that horrific case of his murder? Well, now, the guy that did that has been approved for moving to an open prison. You tell me, do you think we've got our prison priorities right in this country or not? And get this, 80 of the not-so-small boat migrants that have been earmarked for the one-in, one-out scheme have called in the lawyers. Apparently it's degrading and inhumane. Give me strength. Keeping me company for all of that and lots more, former Tory Minister and MEP Sir Robert Goodwill, alongside him, former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. But before we get stuck in, let's give you your 6 o'clock news headlines.
Very good evening to you. The top story tonight at 6. Sir Keir Starmer is meeting world leaders in Paris for talks on how Ukraine could be protected if a ceasefire with Russia is agreed. He's joined President Volodymyr Zelensky and more than 30 allied nations at talks in Paris, hosted by Emmanuel Macron. European leaders are discussing long-term security guarantees, including the idea of an international force to deter future Russian attacks. Ukraine says a US-backed peace plan is close, but major disagreements remain over the territory in the east. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer and several of those European leaders have also said that they will not stop defending Greenland's territorial integrity amid renewed threats from Donald Trump to annex the territory. Paris, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain and the UK say Arctic security is a shared priority and critical to transatlantic stability. Downing Street insists the US president does not pose a threat to Europe, saying the UK's special relationship with Washington remains strong. Greenland's Prime Minister says the territory cannot be taken because you want to, he says, stressing its status is protected by international law. Here, senior officers from West Midlands Police have today rejected claims that they were searching for a reason to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from a match against Aston Villa. MPs have questioned police chiefs over whether intelligence was pulled together to justify that decision, which followed disorder at previous Maccabi games. Police admitted a mistake was made when an officer carried out Google searches, but insist the wider intelligence picture was, they say, properly assessed. Well, Assistant Chief Constable Mike O'Hara said the ban was a reasonable move to protect the public.
The commanders tried to make the right decision. That was reasonable in the circumstances. You've got a very hot community reception. You've got Maccabi Tel Aviv and the Dutch police saying, we feel they actively targeted community members. Those two things together posed a sufficient risk. And the challenge around risk decision-making is public safety has got to be at the heart of it. So, again, I understand the frustration, but there is no conspiracy here. This was a decision based on safety.
Donald Trump has hailed what he called an amazing military achievement in Venezuela, prompting applause from lawmakers during a speech today in Washington. Speaking at the newly renamed Trump Kennedy Center, he claimed American forces had caught Venezuela by surprise. Mr. Trump also accused the radical left of paying people to protest the removal of Nicolas Maduro, a claim the White House has not backed yet with evidence. He went on to promise a major ramp-up in US defense production, declaring, "Nobody can take us."
They knew we were coming, and they were protected, and our guys weren't. You know, our guys are jumping out of helicopters, and they're not protected, and they were. But it was so brilliant. The electricity for almost the entire country was, boom, turned off. That's when they knew there was a problem. There was no electricity. Caracas said, there's no electricity. It's not a... The only people with lights were the people that had candles. It was just off. So we sort of got them a little by surprise, but It was brilliant tactically. It was an incredible thing.
And the technology secretary has warned Elon Musk's social media site X it must act urgently after its AI chatbot known as Grok was used to create sexualized deepfake images, including of children. Liz Kendall said the content was appalling and backed Ofcom, which has demanded answers from Musk's AI company XAI. The regulator is investigating whether safeguards are failing under the Online Safety Act after reports Grok can digitally undress women without consent. X says users who generate illegal content will face consequences. Those are the 6 o'clock headlines. I'll be back with you shortly. Now, though, it's over to Michelle.
Thank you very much for that, Sam. I've got to say, just picking up on the back of that final story there, this AI, artificial intelligence, I get it, it's the future, high five change and all the rest of it. But I've been looking at some of the things that have been going on here with the images that is being created of children, as you've just been hearing. I will never, for the life of me, understand why people with such ease upload pictures of their children onto the internet. It's the Wild West out there, ladies and gents. Maybe take a minute to see what is happening to some of these images. It might make you think twice if indeed you are someone that chooses to share your children. Anyway, I am Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got a new face and a fellow Northerner. I like Northerners. Former Tory Minister and MEP Sir Robert Goodwill, alongside him, former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. Good evening, gents. You're both very welcome tonight. Each and every single one of you always welcome here on Dewbs & Co, and you know the drill. Get in touch and tell me what is on your mind tonight. Join the conversation in all the usual ways. Email me. I'm an old-fashioned bit of a biddy like that, gbviews@gbnews.com. You can also go to the website gbnews.com/yoursay. Of course, you can tweet X me as well, but don't be doing any strange things to my images, though, if you don't mind. Anyway, look, it's a big day today, isn't it, ladies and gents, of course, for the so-called coalition of the willing. Lots has been taking place there. So without further ado, let's cross live to Paris, to our very own Christopher Hope, who has been watching all the comings and going with a keen eye and ear. Tell us, Christopher Hope, what has been going on?
Hi, Michelle. Yeah, welcome to a crispy, a cold, a frozen Elysee Palace here in the heart of Paris, in France, of course, where we've had the meeting of the 27 members of the Coalition of the Willing, this informal group of European leaders plus UK and, of course, Canada, Australia, who have come together to try and support Ukraine against Russia. They met earlier today, coordinated by Emmanuel Macron. Keir Starmer was the only one to arrive by foot. A big embrace with Emmanuel Macron when they met. They've now broken up. A press conference starts within the next half an hour. We're watching it very closely. A draft agreement says they're looking for binding commitment to support Ukraine in the case of a future armed attack by Russia. What they don't want to do is agree a peace deal with Russia and then allow Russia to rearm and re-invade Ukraine at a future date. They want to continue long-term military assistance and help support Ukrainian forces. There'll be a US, certainly a French and British cell here coordinating how to keep the peace and support Ukraine, maybe with US involvement. What all hangs on is, will the US step in and support whatever this coalition of the willing decides to do? Will there be British troops on the ground in Ukraine keeping the peace? Will that be acceptable to Putin, to Vladimir Putin of Russia? What will the US do with its security guarantees? A lot to talk about, but I do think what happened in Venezuela at the weekend when the US seized the leader of Venezuela, I think that has focused minds that Europe can see that the focus of this president is in his sphere of influence. That increasingly is less likely to be Europe. And I just wonder whether watching those 27 leaders traipse into the Elysee Palace this afternoon is the beginnings of what will become eventually the new NATO. And I wonder how long NATO can survive when you've got the main state which underlies NATO, which supplies the military support, making threats towards Greenland, which of course is controlled by Denmark. How can NATO survive that? Is this coalition of the willing increasingly the new vehicle through which we keep our peace and security in Europe? That's what I think may be coming. We will be seeing this press conference for the next half an hour. President Zelensky of Ukraine is there, President Macron of France, Chancellor Merz of Germany, our own Sir Keir Starmer. There'll be a single question from the UK press put to those individuals, and we'll see what comes from that. But I think what's happening in Venezuela at the weekend, the threats towards Greenland, has really focused minds amongst these European leaders. They can't rely on American support, American security anymore. That peace dividend that we've lived on really all part of my adult life for the past 3 decades, that has gone. These European leaders are now stepping up, and the hope will be that from this frozen Parisian capital they can find some way of thawing that conflict and dealing with that conflict in Ukraine and trying to enforce a peace. But of course, anything agreed between Russia, Ukraine and the coalition, the US, Ukraine and the coalition of the willing must be agreed by Russia. That's the next hurdle, and that could be a fatal hurdle, but that's the next way it's got to go.
Christopher Hope, thank you very much for that. So I shall let you go and thaw out, actually. Get yourself a cup of tea before I come back to you after the press conference. As you say, absolutely freezing out there. Robert, let me start with you on this one, if I may. What do you think to some of the things you've been hearing today? And I was quite interested to hear Christopher there pondering the question, is this essentially what you're seeing within that palisade, the new NATO? What do you make to it all?
I think Chris's analysis there was spot on. And I think those of us on this side of the Atlantic who are members of NATO need to be very concerned that America seems to be sort of taking their eye off the ball. You know, President Trump has made it clear he wants to see other NATO members stepping up their defence spending. We've seen that from Germany and Poland, and we have promises that the UK will do that. So, you know, we are responding. But I think for America to abandon NATO, which ultimately could be the case, I think would be very, very dangerous and actually playing into the hands of President Putin, because that's just what he wants to see, the alliance which has for generations now been ranged against the Soviet bloc and then Russia. I think, you know, we need to stick together, and all the signals coming out of the White House, particularly about Denmark and Greenland, are very worrying.
Well, do you mates but all at home join the conversation in all the usual ways, and I'll bring you in a second. But Bill, your thoughts?
I'm equally concerned. If you look at the US national security strategy that was published a few weeks ago, it doesn't see Russia as a threat, and it talks about almost regime change in Europe. And I really fear that under Donald Trump, America is walking away from NATO, and Europe does need to step up. It needs to step up in its support for Ukraine. It needs to increase its defence spending, but it still needs a US backstop in terms of security. And also, if there is to be a peace deal and it's to be properly policed, then Russia needs to be brought to the table. And I see no sense that Trump is willing to put pressure on Russia to come to a peace and secure the future.
And, you know, Bill's just saying there, Robert, that people need to step up and do more to help support Ukraine. Let's see what comes out of the press conference later on. But do you think we'll get ourselves into a situation where you could see UK, and I hate this phrase when people say boots on the ground, because what we mean when we say UK boots on the ground is we mean likely working class boys being put onto the front line of a conflict. And I hate the phrase boots on the ground, because I feel it's so depersonalising of what it actually means and the potential impact that could have on families here in this country. But would you support that?
Well, certainly we shouldn't be there if there's still a conflict going on. I mean, we've done a lot of work training them, we've showing them how to use the equipment we've supplied. But, you know, there could only ever be British or European boots on the ground if you had a genuine peace and maybe a demilitarised zone between the Donbass and the rest of Ukraine, if that were the deal that would come forward. But we certainly can't have a situation that British troops would be engaged while there's still a conflict going on.
One of my viewers, Bill, he's called Philip. He's saying, never mind pondering if what we're seeing is the new NATO, he's saying, are we witnessing the forming of essentially a new European army?
No, because it's going to be individual armies accountable to their own governments, but it is about a collective effort. And I agree with Robert. Any British boots on the ground are going to be after there is a peace agreement to protect that peace and to provide security. And that's in our national interest, you know. If Putin gets his way and he goes further into Ukraine and he potentially goes into other European states, the impact on oil supplies, the impact on security, the impact upon our economy is very, very significant. So we've got a vested interest in what happens in Ukraine. But I really, really hope that the US does not walk away from the NATO alliance, because it is what has kept our security and peace for 75 years.
Roy, he's listening at home. He's in Hampshire, actually. I like it when you all tell me where you're from. Roy's in Hampshire. He says, my question to Macron and Starmer, etc., if I was in the press conference asking questions, would be simple. If you cannot stop illegal migrants crossing the Channel, how on earth do you think that you would be able to stop a Russian army, to your point?
Well, we are seeking to stop migrants crossing the Channel.
Nicking their mobile phones.
Well, yeah, that's part of the way that you target. And
that'll teach them. Don't come over here, Russians. We'll have your SIM card before you know it.
Come on, Michelle.
Come on.
If you get
Shaking in the
if you get people's mobile phones, you can target the people smugglers, and that's in our interest.
Well, where are you going to get them from? The bottom of the sea? They chuck them overboard. But anyway, I won't digress too much onto that.
But it's part of the strategy. But you know, it is massively in our vested interest to get a peace deal in Ukraine, to see it properly policed, both for the benefit of the Ukrainian people, but also for our long-term security as well.
Bruno has got in touch and said, Michelle, at the end of the day, NATO needs the US, plain and simple. To talk of NATO without the US is simply nonsense. What do you say back to Bruno?
They've got a point, because let's face it, you know, we have 2 aircraft carriers, France has 2, Russia's got 1, if you count that one, America's got 27. You know, the American capability is absolutely awesome. And by sticking together in NATO, that isn't just protecting our security in Europe, it's protecting American security, because there are threats, you know, around the world that America faces that we all need to stand together. And when it comes to helping Ukraine, I mean, you know, most of that money has gone to American corporations like General Dynamics and Lockheed Martin and Boeing. So, you know, although, you know, the money has been given as aid to Ukraine, a lot of that's been spent in the American economy, creating American jobs and helping develop some of that capability that they can then use in the future.
Michelle has got in touch and said, why is Keir Starmer so prepared to state and support the rights to Greenland and Denmark citizens, etc., in terms of who owns them and sovereignty, but the Chagossians were given no consideration whatsoever from our human rights guru, Keir Starmer, she says?
Well, no Chagossians had lived in the Chagos Islands for over 40 years.
Oh, come off it. Lots of them still have a view as to what should happen to them.
Yeah, sure. But this was about securing...
And they'll always go on the media. We've spoke to lots of them on this channel. They're really upset that they weren't even considered nor consulted.
Yeah, and look, as a former Foreign Office Minister, I negotiated with the Chagossians, and they're not always straight with the facts. But the reality, the deal was about securing...
Are you calling Chagossians liars?
Yeah, no, not uniformly, but I remember negotiating with the leader of the Chagossians, and he wasn't playing straight with the facts about the collective community.
Well, there you go. Are you in that collective Chagossian community? What do you make to it all? But anyway, keep your thoughts on all of that coming in. Lots more that we need to discuss, and I'll see you after the break to do just that.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dewberry, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up? About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power?
Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber.
Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics.
We'll see where this ruling takes us.
These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, with you till 7 o'clock alongside my new face to the show, Sir Robert Goodwill, alongside him, Bill Rammell. Now, I do like to listen to what you guys have to say, and one of you just got in touch with me in the break. Chrissy, you're called, Christine, you said, I just want to make a point about sight tests for the over 70s. If you've seen this story now, this is what is now just being suggested, that over 70s should have to have their eyesight tested regularly if they want to drive. She says, I agree that people need to have their sight tested regularly when they're older and sight deteriorates. However, something that hasn't been mentioned, she says, is that the biggest problem and possibly the biggest contributor to accidents with older drivers is caused by headlights. LED headlights, she's saying. Since they were introduced, the number of accidents at night for the older drivers has increased massively. She's suggesting it's the headlights that should be checked and perhaps changed, not people's eyesight tests.
Well, the data doesn't quite back that up yet, although lights are getting stronger.
Can I just really interrupt, just to point out to the viewers, in case you're not familiar, you were a former roads minister, so you know a thing or two about this.
So, I mean, the big danger on our road is young drivers, inexperienced young drivers, it's drink drivers and it's drug drivers. The proportion of accidents caused by older people are not great, but we've all known members of our family or other people we know who've kept on driving a little bit too long and maybe their eyesight's gone or their reactions are not so good. I mean, I've got a Class 1 truck licence. I drive a 44-tonne truck from time to time, and I have an annual eye test to a higher standard than the car test. So I don't think it's a priority, but maybe it's something the government should look at and see what the evidence is. But, you know, we don't want to take older people off the road, particularly in rural areas where there's no bus service or no public transport. So, you know, I think we need to see the level of risk. But I rather suspect that some older people, when they get the letter saying, would you like to go in for an eye test, might think, well, maybe now's the time to give in my licence, particularly if you've got a few dents on the car, which have been caused for various reasons.
What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, I think it's the right move, but with some caveats. And look, it's a real live issue. I remember having to persuade my dad in his 80s to stop driving because he'd become a danger to himself and a danger to other people. So I think saying anyone over 70 every 3 years you should have an eye test is sensible and prudent. But the bit that's missing from this strategy for me is what you do about boy racers. Because if you look at the figures, 17 to 24-year-olds, 7% of those are drivers, but they're involved in 25% of fatal accidents. And I think there really needs to be some further efforts to tackle that.
Like what? Because also you can already get things like your black box that can potentially help, you know, bring insurance down. Do we have restrictions in terms of the amount of time you've had to have a licence before you can carry passengers and stuff?
No, and Robert and I were talking about this outside, and I was listening to something this morning. In Australia, you need to have 300 hours driving experience before you can take a driving test. Now, in principle, in terms of safety, I think that's a good move. But also it could be very unequal because, you know, how many people, if they haven't got families with cars that they can drive with, how can they pay for those 300 hours?
Some of you will be watching this and you'll be shouting at your screens or your car radios because you'll be saying, Michelle, this is all well and good when you're talking about new measures for new drivers and stuff, but try getting your hands on driving lessons in this day and age. Try getting your hands on a driving test. I mean, that's where you need to be, ladies and gents. If you want to rake in a small fortune, become driving instructors because they seem to be in scant supply. What's this? Ronald, I think your name is, you're saying taxi drivers. If you want to be checking anyone, you should be checking taxi drivers. You're saying that some of those people seem to be getting more and more dangerous on the road. The problem that you've got, and if you've got an older family member or you're getting on yourself, ageing happens to us all. It's a privilege, isn't it? It's not a right. But just that sense of having to accept that actually my body is changing. I'm not as capable as I used to be. I'm not as mobile, as agile, as whatever as I used to be. That is such a big thing to have to accept when you're not ready and willing to accept that, isn't it? Keep your suggestions on that one coming in. And thanks, Chrissy, for the prompts, because I wasn't actually going to speak about that tonight, but I think it's a great topic. So thank you for bringing that to the front of Dewbs & Co. And that's what this programme is. It's not just about us three, these two handsome chaps and me. It's also about yourselves at home. Join the conversation in all the usual ways. But look, I do want to talk to you about this story. I mentioned this at the top of the programme, these 80 not-so-small boat migrants that have involved lawyers now. They've been earmarked for this one-in, one-out scheme, they say. It's degrading, you guessed it. It infringes their human rights and so on and so forth. How pathetic is this, Bill Rammell?
It is, and look, it's simply not true that the one-in, one-out scheme is causing, what do they say, fear, humiliation and psychological distress. This is a concerted legal attempt to thwart the government's reasonable actions to provide a deterrent in terms of boat crossings and to return boat crossers to what is a safe country, France. You know, we're not talking about people being sent anywhere else. This is about returning them to France, and in no sense is this a breach of their human rights. I don't think their case has got legal legs, and I hope that it will be rebutted. In the first 3 months of the one-in, one-out scheme, 193 people have been returned, which is welcome, but the numbers need to be significantly ramped up.
195 back, though, so it's minus.
We've got legal recourse to be here, but the 193 have been sent back. We need, if we're to have a significant deterrent, to ramp those numbers up.
I mean, it's almost, I don't mean to be derogatory to people because I'm not, you know, I'm a humane person. But it is almost laughable now, and this is the problem, because it's a very serious matter, what's going on in this channel, but it has now become so pathetic, so akin to some kind of clown world, that when you're listening to the claims that these people are making, they're asking for the UN bodies, etc., to get involved, it's just almost getting beyond the point of ridiculousness, isn't it?
I mean, I used to get a lot of letters when I was an MP saying we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough teachers. I never had one letter saying we don't have enough lawyers. And I think some lawyers are getting very fat out of this whole immigration industry and taking cases to the European Court and the rest of it. It's outrageous. And looking at the odds, you know, if I was one of the 41,000 people looking at getting on a boat to come across the channel, and I thought I might be one of the 173 that gets sent back, I think I'd take those odds. And that's the problem. I mean, you know, Keir came into power saying we'll smash the gangs. That's not going very well. And I think one in, one out is having no impact at all either.
Yes, but Robert, your lot were not much better.
We had Rwanda on the stocks ready to go, and I think that would have been a disincentive.
But Rishi Sunak was the person that chose not to follow through with that. He was the one that chose to call an early election before a single plane had got off the ground.
Well, but Labour then, in their first move, scrapped the scheme before seeing if it would work. And don't forget, we had a great return scheme with Albania.
So why didn't you do it yourselves then?
We had a great return scheme with Albania. Well, we would have got the Rwanda scheme up and running more quickly had it not been fought tooth and nail in Parliament by the Labour Party and in the courts. So that was why we didn't get it through faster.
You know, Rwanda was never a deterrent. And although I accept that the boats are the most visible manifestation of illegal migration, migration, actually net migration, your government allowed to reach 1 million people net per year. It's now down to 200,000, and I've been looking at some reports previously that we might, in the next year to 18 months, reach net zero net migration. But, you know, your government let net migration go up to 1 million, which was completely unsustainable.
Let's not forget that the reason the figures have just come down is because of the measures we put in place, particularly family members not being able to join students and those coming to work, about restrictions on students, about in particular looking at how you can ensure that if you bring somebody across to take a British job, that it's a well-paid job. So we set in levels of income. Also for spousal people joining to get married, we increased the limit for incomes to bring them across, so they weren't a burden on the taxpayer. So many of the reasons why net migration has come down is because we've managed to bring the measures we put in place are now bearing fruit, and also because the economy is not burning very well, and therefore people aren't coming in to take up jobs.
I accept that, but Labour in opposition supported those measures and has gone further, because we recognise that the so-called Boris wave, which completely opened the floodgates, was completely unsustainable.
You see, one of the problems in all of this as well is housing. And it's been kind of shared today that apparently when you look at the number of people coming into this country compared to the number of houses actually being built, apparently immigration apparently accounts for 1 in 3, the equivalent of these new homes being built. And this is one of the problems here. You guys are not meeting your own housing building targets. And even if you took your house building target and you stuck it on steroids and you attached it to a rocket and you fired it up and then some to increase it, you still wouldn't be building enough houses, not only to meet the needs of the British people, but actually to meet the sheer volume of people coming into this country.
There's been significant changes in the planning and infrastructure bill that has come in, that is, bringing in planning reform, creating a default presumption in favour of development, which I think is very, very welcome. But it's always been recognised that that would mean the growth in housing was backloaded, because you can't start building before you change the system, and that's what the government has done. We need to get on with that. We need to build the homes that are necessary, predominantly necessary for British citizens who've been here for donkey's years, and it's an absolute imperative.
I tell you what, a lot of my viewers would have been incensed by, quite frankly, when you hear about these schemes. You've got hundreds of millions of pounds now being made available to build brand new council housing for migrants. I mean, that is, when you're a British citizen that's paid into this system, you're on a housing list as long as your arm. Then you get to hear that actually in well-to-do areas and all the rest of it, where you couldn't even afford dream of affording a house, you're now getting hundreds of millions of pounds earmarked for this. What do you think?
It makes people very angry indeed. Yes, we do need to build more housing, but I feel sorry for the people who are patiently waiting on a waiting list to get a council house, and they find themselves being leapfrogged by maybe immigrants or by people who, for one reason or another, are homeless. And it really is something we need to address to make sure that we have British houses for British people.
I'm going to have to put your view in a queue, I'm afraid, because let me take you live back to Paris, because I can show you live scenes right now. You've got Macron, you've got Zelensky, and you've got Keir Starmer there, just doing the theatrical thing of signing the paperwork for whatever it is that they've been agreeing in this coalition of the willing talks we've been hearing about today. If you're listening on the radio, all three gents are now taking to the stage, taking their position behind their respective podiums. In just a second, I shall be cutting live into this feed so we can listen in to see what it is that they have been discussing and agreeing during this conversation today. I mean, what's the number one thing you would like to hear as all of those guys take their positions?
That there is an agreement to collectively within, this is wider than Europe, within the coalition of the willing, to provide the money, to provide the resources and provide the troops to police any peace deal in Ukraine.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in the meantime, we need to continue to supply the equipment that the Ukrainians need to defend their land. And if there is a peace deal, then we need to make sure that's a robust peace deal, it's a watertight peace deal, and it won't just be an opportunity for Putin to rearm and have another go maybe in 5 or 6 years' time.
Well, ladies and gents, I'm taking you straight there. So whilst you're preparing yourself, getting comfortable, it's just the introduction right now, and I shall cut straight over to it. But just have a think. What is it, the key thing that you want to hear announced any second now? Should we take the feed? Shall I shut up, quite frankly? Oh, no, it's not in English, so I shall just keep talking. I think they're just doing the pleasantries in French right now.
I am a French graduate. I could translate for you. Yeah, but I'm not going to.
The only thing I could do is probably give you directions and ask for some sugar in your tea. That's the kind of level of foreign language speaking that I have at the moment. But, of course, this is Macron. Lots of my viewers are getting in touch and saying, Michelle, will any of this make a blind bit of difference? Archie has got in touch, you're a harsh man, Archie, and says, never mind the coalition of the willing, this is the coalition of the Wallies. He's saying. That's a little bit harsh. A couple of my other viewers are saying, Michelle, are we witnessing an even closer slide to the EU? Has Keir Starmer forgotten that we voted for the exact opposite of that? That sentiment is coming through. And by the way, if you're wondering why is Michelle not shutting up, because it's not in English yet. The second that it is, I shall be taking you live there. You will not miss a nanosecond of this. Worry not. Do you think that's a little bit of a harsh sentiment that my viewer just had there, where he doesn't basically rate any of these chaps? It feels like
Germany, France, UK, we're strong military powers. We need to stick together to make sure that we...
Well, you're fascinating, Robert, but let's go back.
Ukraine and the United States of America. We're talking about strong security guarantees. This declaration sets out each of the components of this security guarantee. We have a report from our heads of general staff and also from the side of the Euro-American coordination. And here we have taken due note of the fact that there is a coordination body that will fully coordinate all of the competent armed forces and provide coordination between the coalition of the willing, United States of America and Ukraine in operational terms that will support the general staff of the coalition here in Paris. So within this coalition, on the basis of all the work done in recent months, we have consolidated our approaches. Firstly, with the setting up ceasefire monitoring mechanisms to be placed under American leadership, with contributions from several states that said they were willing and able to do so. Then long-term support, firstly to Ukrainian armed forces that are and will remain in the front line of defense and deterrence against aggression. So we will have on a volunteer basis 800,000 men with training, capabilities and all the necessary resources to ensure that this army can deter any new aggression. Then we will continue to lay the ground for the creation of a multinational force in the air, on the seas and on land to provide reassurance after the ceasefire, and a long way behind the contact line that was agreed between all the general staff from France, Germany and Poland. I would also like to salute the work done and offered by Turkey in maritime theatre. They are willing to take on responsibilities. And fourthly, we have decided to translate into legal terms these commitments to support Ukraine in the event of a new attack by Russia through solidarity and intervention mechanisms. And also, we are continuing to converge around the questions of economic support and corruption. That's the second thing we talked about. But at the same time, we have consolidated the architecture, the planning, the means and the rules for the security guarantee for Ukraine the day after peace is signed, both for Ukraine and the continent of Europe. Part of our discussion was then focusing on Ukraine's future prosperity with the American plan that was presented and the European contributions with a desire to speed up our work alongside Ukraine so that in the next few weeks this prosperity plan can be finalized will be a major component of the peace agreements. All of this constitute essential pillars of what will support the negotiations that are underway, and we want therefore that to be completed as soon as possible. But these security guarantees are the key to ensuring that never a peace agreement can mean Ukrainian surrender, and never a peace agreement can mean a new threat for Ukraine. And I think what's very important to underscore is that all the countries represented here, but also all the countries in the coalition of the willing, and those who attended this meeting following the excellent coordination that we had last year in Berlin. All those actors share the same desire for peace in Ukraine and Europe, but we insist that this be a fair, lasting and strong peace. And we're all clear in our minds that the peace agreements signed by Russia in the last 15 years have all been broken in Moldova, Georgia and Ukraine. Therefore, based on that experience, we want to have peace and guarantees of peace on the basis of Europe's experience of the last 15 years. This is why the Paris Declaration includes these guarantees and notes the convergence between coalition of the willing, Ukraine and the United States of America. In addition to all this, in the short term, we will continue to provide our support to Ukraine to cope with all the challenges it is facing at the moment in terms of protecting its airspace, protecting civilians who are continually targeted, even as we speak, by the Russians. And we will also continue our work on sanctions to limit and reduce Russia's war effort. So that is what I have to report, thanking my colleagues in Europe and the United States for the progress that has been possible thanks to today's meeting. I'll now hand over to President Zelensky.
Well, there you go. That was President Macron. They're bringing us up to speed with what has just been agreed on this situation between the coalition of the willing. Let's return now to President Zelensky.
As well as the American representatives and all the journalists present. First of all, I would like to thank you for this meeting, which is the most representative. 27 leaders of the European Union, NATO, Australia, New Zealand, Turkey. As a matter of fact, it is a very broad representation, and we are able to sign a document. This is very concrete. There is a declaration, a joint declaration, and there's also this declaration of intent signed by our three countries. And this illustrates the willingness of the coalition and the European countries to work for peace. And we want to be ready so that when diplomacy reaches peace, we can place the forces of the coalition of the willing. The details will be set out in other documents. We're working on which countries are willing to contribute and guarantee security in the air, at sea and on land. We're assessing which forces are necessary, who will be able to who shall coordinate all of that. And we also want to work on monitoring and clearly say how this force or that force will be financed, as well as the Ukrainian army. I believe that our Ukrainian forces will be based on the Ukrainian army with other elements. The military from France, the United Kingdom, and others have worked on the necessary military equipment. Enough details, and we know which countries will get involved and what each of them will contribute separately. And allow me to thank every leader who is willing to contribute to this peaceful solution. aggression. We also addressed, we had very concrete discussions with the American delegation regarding the monitoring of peace. It's very important for us. What is crucial in this peace deal is anything that can prevent a new Russian aggression. We also made progress with the American representatives who worked on documents in Paris, and we will have other meetings with Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner. We are working on some bilateral agreements, bilateral documents as well as trilateral documents, and are hoping to sign these soon in different formats. And God willing, we will succeed. We are very grateful for the support of the United States of America, and so that they can provide the necessary support so that Russia cannot aggress Ukraine once again. And we very much agree upon the fact that the guarantees must be based on some legal grounds to be confirmed by the American Congress. Of course, some issues remain open regarding these documents, including the 20-point document. And what we really need to work upon is the issue of territory. We have a number of ideas that could be helpful, and if some issues are not remain blocked between our teams, and the leaders can also get involved. There will be other discussions, and I would like to thank you, Emmanuel, for giving this opportunity, allowing our teams to be able to continue working here for 2 days, and I'd like to thank the American representatives for contributing to it. When it comes to security, the architecture already exists, and our partners can pressure Russia to put an end to this war. Ukraine never stood and never prevented peace. Russia started this aggression, and it is very clear as to who should do what is necessary to be done to put an end to this war. So I would like to thank all of those who contribute to peace. We all understand that we need to stop the aggressor to allow peace. The deep strikes, the sanctions, our diplomacy, all of this is working. Today we also talked about our air defense. It is essential. Some leaders of the coalition of the willing mentioned it. For us, it is a daily issue. It is true that Ukraine needs missiles every day because, notwithstanding diplomacy, the Russian strikes continue. Russia is not concentrating on diplomacy. They are striking our villages or cities or infrastructure. And we discussed this issue with President Trump in Mar-a-Lago, and I would like to thank him deeply for his understanding and his support. In Paris, the extension of air defense has been discussed already again. The stronger our air defense, the stronger will be our diplomacy. So thank you to all of you for your support. Thank you.
and to work with the US to guarantee Ukraine's security for the long term. This work is now more advanced than ever. Today's joint declaration set that out in clear terms. On top of that, and alongside President Zelensky and President Macron, we went even further today. We signed a declaration of intent on the deployment of forces to Ukraine in the event of a peace deal. This is a vital part of our iron-cast commitment to stand with Ukraine for the long term. It paves the way for the legal framework under which British, French and partner forces could operate on Ukrainian soil, securing Ukraine's skies and seas and regenerating Ukraine's armed forces for the future. We discussed these issues in detail today, and so I can say that following a ceasefire, the UK and France will establish military hubs across Ukraine. and build protected facilities for weapons and military equipment to support Ukraine's defensive needs. And with our coalition partners, we've also agreed significant further steps. First, that we will participate in US-led monitoring and verification of any ceasefire. Second, we will support the long-time provision of armaments for Ukraine's defence. And third, we will work towards binding commitments to support Ukraine in the case for a future armed attack by Russia. This is all about building the practical foundations on which peace would rest. But we can only get to a peace deal if Putin is ready to make compromises. And so we have to be frank. For all Russia's words, Putin is not showing that he's ready for peace. Over the last few weeks, we've seen the opposite. Further horrific strikes on Ukraine, killing and wounding civilians, and cutting off power for millions of people in the dead of winter. His forces hit a hospital in Kyiv just yesterday. And he's tried to distract from peace efforts with unfounded claims of attacks on his residence. Now, this only hardens our resolve. We will continue to step out our support for Ukraine's defence in 2026 to ensure it gets the equipment and backing it needs to continue the fight. And we will keep the pressure up on Russia, including further measures on oil traders and shadow fleet operators funding Putin's war chest. We will continue these efforts until they come to the table in good faith and until we realise the goal that we all share of a just and lasting peace. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Kim. Monsieur le Chancelier, dear Friedrich.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, lieber Emmanuel, meine Damen und Herren. Das neue Jahr beginnt, wie das alte geendet hat, mit intensiver Friedensdiplomatie für die Ukraine. Und auf dem Weg hin zum Frieden.
There you go. You've just been hearing from President Macron, President Zelensky, and of course Prime Minister Keir Starmer. This is live in Paris. Of course, each of these chaps speaking their native language, so we're just going to get that translation for you. This, of course, is the German Chancellor speaking right now. I shall get that translation feed for you and take you straight back to that as soon as we can. Don't you worry, you will not be missing out. But of course, if you're just tuning in, you're wondering what's going on. This is a huge day, but I'll take you live now to Paris again.
I'd like to start by thanking Emmanuel Macron for his hospitality here in Paris. And also like to thank both Emmanuel and Keir for preparing this meeting today, along with Volodymyr Zelensky. Because, ladies and gentlemen, today, in the triangle of Europeans, Ukraine, and United States, we have built on the progress that we achieved last year in Berlin. This is a shared success, and I'd also like to thank Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, the representative of the United States, and thank them and President Trump for their support in all this effort. We have the same strategic goal. First and foremost, we want to make sure that the weapons in Ukraine, after 4 years of war, be finally silenced. The country is on the verge of a humanitarian energy crisis, and therefore we are stepping up, in any case, our enormous efforts so as to reach a swift conclusion. Secondly, we want there to be a ceasefire, and unlike the Minsk Agreement of 2015, one based on strong security guarantees. And thirdly, as Europeans and Ukrainians, we want to ensure that we can shape this ceasefire together. Today we focused on the contribution that Europe and its partners after a ceasefire could make for Ukraine. As Coalition of the Willing, we will be shouldering our responsibilities. We want to help to make sure that in the future there are strong armed forces in Ukraine that constitute a credible deterrent for Russia through arming, training and funding. We will also take part in the monitoring of a ceasefire, and we will also make a contribution to strengthening Ukraine on land and the sea and in the air. With our partners in Washington, we agree for that certain conditions have to be met. Firstly, there needs to be strong legally binding security guarantees, including from the USA, and an American backstop to provide security European commitments. I'm very thankful that the United States has already said it'd be willing to do so. Secondly, the ceasefire has to be organized in such a way with Russia that the Coalition of the Willing can play an active role. We are actually working towards that. And thirdly, of course, all partners in the coalition have to go through their domestic processes to decide what contribution they will make. Germany will continue to support politically, financially and militarily. That could mean, for example, that after a ceasefire for the Ukraine in a neighbouring NATO area, we would have a presence. As for the type and scope of a German contribution, obviously that has to be decided by the German government and parliament once these conditions have been specified and clarified. For me and for the German government, I would say that for the moment, nothing is excluded. As of now, in the fourth year of the war, Germany is Kiev's strongest supporter, and after a ceasefire, Germany will accept responsibility for the security of Ukraine and for the continent as a whole. We also discussed today how after a ceasefire we could promote the reconstruction of Ukraine. We are working on a package for that among European partners in close coordination with the USA. The President of the Commission today explained today how the Commission could contribute to that. And this reconstruction is indissociable from the question of security guarantees. Economic strength will be an indispensable guarantee for ensuring that in the future Ukraine can present a credible deterrent to Russia. So, dear Volodymyr, this also means certain expectations of Ukraine, as we've discussed in Russia. Ukraine must make sure that its young men can find decent jobs in their own country rather than travelling to Germany, Poland or France. This is something that we have already discussed in Brussels together, and I think that this is an expectation that Ukraine can meet and will meet. So, ladies and gentlemen, no one can say today whether the arms will be silenced in Ukraine in 6 weeks or in 6 months, but we are working tirelessly towards that peace. We'll obviously have to make compromises. We will probably not be able to achieve the ideal of a perfectly designed peace, not as much as we would like, but we have to learn not from books, but from the existing geopolitical circumstances going forward in the next 3 months. We will go about this with perseverance, realism, and a clear view of what is best for Europe. That's to say, a stable ceasefire, strong security guarantees, and peace in Europe, linking Ukrainians and Europeans that we form together. So once again, thank you for this excellent meeting today. It really was worth coming together in such great numbers. Never happened before in the Coalition of the Willing. We've never had so many people in one room as we had today in Paris. And that shows clearly to Russia that they have to stop the war. There's no point continuing it, and as Coalition of the Willing, we are willing to work with Ukraine and the US to find a way through to permanent or stable peace in Europe. So all the best for Ukraine. Thank you very much.
To work on this endeavor. I want to be clear that Jared and I have been working with Ambassador Kushner for close to 10 hours today. And we'll be meeting with the Ukrainian delegation this evening, continuing that work. Because President Trump's mandate is that he wants a peace in Ukraine. And we are determined on his behalf to do everything possible to attain that peace. A lot of progress began first in Geneva. We made tremendous progress there. We moved on to Berlin. Lots of progress happened there. And as President Zelensky identified, we had a very compelling meeting in Mar-a-Lago. And we look forward to more progress as a result of everything that's occurred today. We think we're largely finished with security protocols, which are important so that the people of Ukraine know that when this ends, it ends forever. But we also think, critically, that we are very, very close to finishing up as robust a prosperity agreement as any country has ever seen coming out of conflicts like this. It will aspirationally mean large, large possibilities for the Ukrainian people, for people coming home from war who will find wonderful jobs out there. We're working with BlackRock, Larry Fink in this endeavor, and we think it's going to be very, very important for the people of Ukraine. And we believe that a robust economy correlates and works directly with these security protocols. It makes Ukraine a strong, independent nation, and we think that's really important in terms of the long-term future. Jared and I are prepared to do anything necessary to work with our European colleagues. Prime Minister Starmer, you've been incredible, as has Chancellor Merz, and all of the European nations who we met today, who we spoke with. It's all been an important meeting today, and we think we've made a lot of progress. We heard President Zelensky and some of the other people here talking about land options. That will be the most critical issue, and we're going to be continuing on with those discussions, and hopefully we'll be able to meet or come up with certain compromises with regard to that. But I do want to say this. We are here to mediate and help in the peace process, and we're prepared to do anything necessary to get to that place. President Trump strongly, fervently believes that this killing has to stop, that the carnage has to stop. And we're determined, all of us up here, to be a part of that.
Nothing to add. That was perfectly said.
Okay. Thank you.
Nous allons passer aux questions. Yeah. One question by delegation. Je vous en prie.
C'est bon. Bonsoir. Claire Gatinois pour Le Monde. Bonsoir messieurs les présidents, chefs d'État, chefs de gouvernement. Bonsoir messieurs les envoyés spéciaux.
Questions. We'll take questions now. Go ahead. Good evening. Claire Gatinois from Le Monde. Good evening, presidents, prime ministers, heads of state government and special envoys. President Macron, this is the 15th time, as you said, that the coalition of the willing has come together to produce security guarantees for Ukraine, hoping for the support of the United States. And now Trump has not firmly committed to American support. After what happened in Venezuela and the threats to Greenland sovereignty, can Europeans still trust our American ally? Don't you think we should think of security guarantees without the United States? And regarding Greenland, in the light of what was said this morning, should we consider deploying European troops to protect that territory and to protect this? Is it because you want to protect links with the United States you haven't condemned the intervention in Venezuela? Thank you. That multiple question, and I wish you a Happy New Year. On the question of Venezuela, which I think is not really connected with today's matters, diplomacy has its own roots and ways. French diplomacy has already expressed itself. We have to see that as a coherent message. I think I've been very clear about that. Regarding today's matters, the presence of President Trump's special envoys today and the commitments by President Trump himself, in particular what he said at the meeting in Mar-a-Lago at the end of last year with President Zelensky.
Well, there you go. This is a huge moment, isn't it, in the war in Ukraine? A declaration of intent there being signed and agreed, which will see Britain and France come together to put boots on the ground in Ukraine as part of a potential peace deal. Someone that will have an opinion or two on that, Nigel Farage. But for me, good night.
Good evening. Well, what you just witnessed there are two press conferences going on at the same time in Paris. One is the European Coalition of the Willing, which basically means that Britain and France are prepared to put boots on the ground in Ukraine once there has been a peace deal, with the Germans gently murmuring non-specific support, the Italians and many others completely absent. But the really big players in the room were Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump's son-in-law, who was also there in the room. And they were talking about something completely different. They were talking about still attempting to get a peace deal, which, however optimistic they appear after meetings at Mar-a-Lago and wherever it may be, still, I think, is some way away. What does it all mean? It means that the Americans are still trying very hard to broker a peace deal, but frankly, Vladimir Putin doesn't, it seems to me, want to play, but they will go on trying because Trump is absolutely committed to it. And then what you've got are a series of European countries,